The council chamber fell silent when Park Ji-ho walked to the center platform. Representatives from 200 alien species watched the human ambassador with curious eyes. Most of them had never seen a human before. Earth was new to the galactic community, having discovered faster-than-light travel only 15 years ago. The humans were considered primitive by galactic standards. Park Ji-ho stood alone under the bright lights. His dark suit looked simple compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by other ambassadors. He carried no weapons, no guards, nothing but a small data device in his hand. His face showed no emotion as he activated the holographic display above him. The images that appeared made several aliens gasp. The colony world of New Busan burned, cities reduced to ash, bodies floating in space where evacuation ships had been destroyed. 200,000 humans dead in less than an hour. The Valtari Empire had struck without warning, without mercy, without even a declaration of war. The Valtari representative, Archon Thelmora, stood in her section of the chamber. She was tall and elegant, her silver skin gleaming under the lights. Her species had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They commanded 847 star systems, their fleets numbered in the thousands. She looked at the images with cold indifference. The colony was built in restricted space, Thelmora said, her voice echoing through the chamber. We gave humanity sufficient warning to evacuate. They chose to ignore our directive. The consequences were expected. Park Ji-ho let the images continue playing. Children in schools, families in their homes, hospitals full of patients, all destroyed in nuclear fire. He waited until every ambassador in the chamber had seen enough. Then he spoke. My daughter was on New Busan, Park Ji-ho said quietly. She was 7 years old. She loved to paint pictures of stars. She wanted to be an astronaut when she grew up. He paused, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. She died in her classroom when your missiles hit. She had no time to run, no time to say goodbye, no time to understand why she had to die. The chamber remained silent. Several ambassadors looked uncomfortable. Even among the cold logic of galactic politics, the death of children touched something universal. Humanity has reviewed the galactic laws, Park Ji-ho continued. We have studied your customs, your treaties, your rules of engagement. We have tried to understand how civilized species conduct themselves. He looked directly at Thelmora. And we have concluded that your laws do not protect us. Your treaties do not save our children. Your civilization is built on the bones of weaker species who could not defend themselves. Thelmora's expression hardened. Choose your next words carefully, human. The Empire does not tolerate insults. Park Ji-ho smiled, but there was no humor in it. I am not here to insult you, Archon. I am here to inform you of a decision made by the government of Earth and all human colonies. He pressed a button on his data device. As of this moment, humanity declares total war against the Valtari Empire. We will accept nothing less than your complete surrender or your complete destruction. The chamber erupted in chaos. Ambassadors shouted in dozens of languages. Some laughed at the absurdity of humanity's declaration. Others looked shocked. A few began calculating the political implications. Thelmora did laugh. The sound was musical and mocking. You control 12 systems, human. 12 primitive worlds with outdated technology. You have no energy shields, no quantum weapons, no singularity drives. Your entire species numbers less than 10 billion. We have defeated empires 1,000 times stronger than you. She leaned forward. Your species will be extinct within 1 solar cycle. This I promise you. Park Ji-ho gathered his papers. He looked tired, older than his 40 years. You destroyed one of our cities, Archon. You killed our children because you thought we were too weak to respond. You thought wrong. He turned to leave, then stopped. Let me tell you something about humans. We are very good at 2 things. Remembering who hurt us and making them regret it. See you on the battlefield. As Park Ji-ho left the chamber, most ambassadors assumed humanity had just committed suicide. They did not know about Admiral Kang Min-ho, who was already moving Earth's hidden fleets into position. They did not know about Major Lee Hye-jin, who had spent 10 years training every human colony in guerrilla warfare. They did not know that humanity had been preparing for this war since the day they met their first alien species. On Earth, Admiral Kang Min-ho stood in the command center deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Around him, holographic displays showed every human ship, every defensive position, every weapon system humanity had built. He was 53 years old, a veteran of Earth's last World War. He understood something the Valtari did not. Humans had been killing each other efficiently for thousands of years. "Sir, the Valtari 7th Battle Fleet is moving toward Earth," his tactical officer reported. 200 ships. They will arrive in 72 hours. Kang Minho nodded. "Good. Activate Protocol Omega. I want every civilian ship retrofitted with missiles. Every asteroid in the belt gets a nuclear mine. Every satellite becomes a weapon. They want to see what humans do when cornered? Let us show them." Major Lee Hyejeon sat in a briefing room with 50 Special Forces operators. These men and women had been selected from every branch of Earth's military. They were the best humanity had to offer. Now they would become something new, the nightmare that hunted in the dark spaces between stars. "The Valtari have never fought guerrilla warfare," Hyejeon explained. "They have never faced an enemy that hides among civilians. They have never dealt with insurgents, terrorists, or resistance fighters. They fight honorable battles between fleets in open space." She smiled coldly. "We will teach them that honor means nothing when you are dead." The operators listened carefully as she outlined their missions. They would infiltrate Valtari territory. They would sabotage supply lines. They would assassinate officers. They would turn the Empire's own people against them. It would be dirty work, the kind that kept soldiers awake at night, but it would keep humanity alive. On the moon, Commander Choi Dae-hyun prepared his trap. Hidden beneath the lunar surface were railgun batteries powerful enough to punch through any known shield. The guns had been built in secret over 10 years, disguised as mining operations. Now they waited, silent and deadly. "They will come expecting Earth to surrender," Choi Dae-hyun told his crew. "They will see a helpless planet and feel confident. That confidence will kill them." When the Valtari 7th Battle Fleet arrived in the Sol system, they found no resistance. Earth hung in space, blue and beautiful and apparently defenseless. Admiral Korthan, commanding the Valtari fleet, ordered his ships forward. It would be a simple matter to force Earth's surrender. Then the moon opened fire. Then the asteroids revealed themselves as weapons platforms. Then 10,000 civilian ships dropped their disguises and launched missiles. The trap closed like a steel fist. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Valtari 7th Battle Fleet was destroyed. Every ship, every soldier, every officer. 200 vessels reduced to debris. Humanity lost half its fleet in the fighting. But the message was clear. Humans would rather die fighting than live on their knees. The news of the 7th Battle Fleet's destruction reached the Valtari homeworld 3 days later. Emperor Velkoth, who had ruled for 400 years, called an emergency council. His military advisors could not explain how primitive humans had destroyed 200 warships. The Emperor's response was simple: send more ships. Send overwhelming force. Crush humanity before other species began to question Valtari strength. Within 2 weeks, 5 Valtari battle groups began moving toward human territory. Each battle group contained 300 ships equipped with weapons that could crack planets. The Valtari were done underestimating their enemy. This time they would not stop until every human world was conquered. But the Valtari did not understand the enemy they faced. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not follow rules written thousands of years ago. They had learned warfare on a planet where survival meant adapting faster than your enemies. Now they would teach the galaxy what that meant. Captain Kim Sora commanded a small ship called the Silent Wind. It was not impressive to look at, built from scavenged alien technology and human ingenuity. The ship had no heavy weapons, no thick armor, no powerful shields. What it had was stealth technology that made it nearly invisible to sensors. The Valtari had never needed to develop detection systems for stealth ships because no one in the galaxy used them. The idea of hiding in battle was considered cowardly. Humans called it smart. Kim Sora took her ship deep into Valtari space, moving silently between their worlds. She did not attack military targets. That would have been expected. Instead, she found something better: the automated supply network that kept the Valtari fleets functioning. The Empire relied on AI systems to manage the flow of fuel, ammunition, food, and spare parts across 847 star systems. It was efficient and reliable. It was also vulnerable. Sora's technical officer, a young man named Park Min-jae, spent 3 days mapping the network. He found the central control nodes, the backup systems, the security protocols. Then he found the weakness. The Valtari had designed their network to be efficient, not secure. Why would they need security? No one had ever attacked their supply lines before. "We can shut down 20% of their logistics network," Park Min-jae reported. 3 of their battle groups will be stranded within a week. No fuel, no ammunition, no supplies. Kim Sora nodded. Do it, and make sure they cannot fix it quickly. The virus they uploaded was a masterpiece of human coding. It did not simply shut down the network. It corrupted the data, making the Valtari systems believe supplies were in places they were not. Ships were routed to empty stations. Fuel tankers arrived at the wrong locations. Ammunition shipments disappeared into the void. By the time the Valtari realized what was happening, 3 entire battle groups were drifting in space, helpless. The Valtari commanders were furious. They called it dishonorable warfare, attacking logistics instead of fighting properly. They demanded the humans face them in open battle. Humanity's response was broadcast across their networks. We fight to win, not to satisfy your sense of honor. While Kim Sora disrupted supply lines, Lieutenant Han Jiwoo was fighting a different kind of war. Before joining the military, Jiwoo had been one of Earth's best hackers. He had spent his youth breaking into corporate networks and government databases, always staying one step ahead of security. Now he used those skills against an enemy that had never faced a serious cyber attack. The Valtari Empire relied heavily on interconnected computer systems. Their ships, their weapons, their infrastructure, everything connected to a central network. It made their military incredibly efficient. Orders could be transmitted across the galaxy in seconds. Fleet movements were coordinated perfectly. Resources were allocated with precision. Jiwoo looked at their network and saw opportunity. Humanity had learned painful lessons about network security during their own cyber wars. They knew how to isolate systems, how to detect intrusions, how to protect critical infrastructure. The Valtari had never needed to learn these lessons. They were about to learn them the hard way. The virus Jiwoo created was elegant in its simplicity. It did not destroy Valtari systems. It turned them against each other. Navigation computers began giving false coordinates. Weapon targeting systems identified friendly ships as hostile. Communication networks transmitted false orders. The virus spread slowly, infecting one system at a time, waiting until it had penetrated deep into the Valtari network before activating. When it finally triggered, chaos erupted across a dozen Valtari worlds. Ships fired on their own fleets. Planetary defenses shot down civilian transports. Logistics computers routed critical supplies to random coordinates in deep space. The Valtari military, which had operated with perfect efficiency for centuries, suddenly could not trust any of their systems. The Empire's response was to shut down their networks and revert to manual control. But this meant their military lost the coordination that made them effective. Fleet movement slowed. Communications became unreliable. The Valtari were learning that their technological superiority could become a weakness. Dr. Yoon Min-suk commanded a different kind of battle. From a bunker beneath Seoul, he was a psychological warfare specialist who understood that wars were won in minds before they were won on battlefields. His team studied every piece of data they had on Valtari psychology, culture, and society. They looked for weaknesses, fears, and pressure points. What they found was fascinating. The Valtari had been the dominant power for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to lose. Their entire culture was built on the assumption of superiority. They had never faced an existential threat. They had never questioned whether they might lose a war. Min-suk planned to introduce them to doubt. His team began hijacking Valtari communication networks and broadcasting carefully crafted messages. They showed footage of every human victory. They displayed captured Valtari soldiers looking defeated and afraid. They broadcast interviews with human civilians who spoke calmly about their willingness to die fighting. The message was always the same. Humans would never stop, never surrender, never accept defeat. But the most effective propaganda was not about human strength. It was about Valtari weakness. Min-suk's team showed images of Valtari commanders making mistakes. They highlighted every tactical failure. They questioned why the mighty empire could not defeat a primitive species. They planted seeds of doubt that grew into fear. Within 3 months of war, the Valtari people were asking questions their leaders could not answer. Why were supply lines failing? Why were their networks compromised? Why were their fleets losing to an inferior enemy? The empire had always provided security and stability. Now it provided only casualties and confusion. Young Valtari soldiers began to hesitate before following orders. Officers questioned their commanders. Citizens started to wonder if the war was worth the cost. The Empire's greatest strength had always been the absolute confidence of its people. Now that confidence was cracking. On Earth, Admiral Kang Minho watched the reports with satisfaction. "We are not trying to destroy their fleets," he explained to his staff. "We are trying to destroy their will to fight. Every supply line we cut, every network we corrupt, every doubt we plant, brings us closer to victory." Major Lee Hyojin led her Special Forces teams deeper into Valtari territory. They moved like ghosts through enemy space, striking targets and vanishing before the Valtari could respond. They sabotaged factories. They destroyed supply depots. They assassinated key officers. Every attack was calculated to cause maximum disruption with minimum risk. But the most important thing Hyojin's teams did was make contact with the species the Valtari had conquered. The Empire ruled over dozens of vassal races who had been subjugated over the centuries. These species provided resources, labor, and soldiers for the Valtari war machine. They had accepted their fate because the Empire seemed invincible. Now they were watching humanity fight the Empire to a standstill. They saw that the Valtari could bleed. They learned that the Empire could be hurt. Hyojin's teams provided these species with weapons, training, and hope. Rebellions began to spark across Valtari space. The Empire found itself fighting not just humanity, but the seeds of revolution in their own territory. The Valtari commanders demanded to know how this was happening. How could a species that had barely discovered FTL travel be winning? The answer was simple but difficult for them to accept. Humans had spent their entire history learning to fight. Every nation, every tribe, every group had developed ways to survive against stronger enemies. Humanity had thousands of years of experience in warfare, diplomacy, deception, and survival. The Valtari had 3,000 years of experience in being strong. Now they were learning that strength alone was not enough. 6 months into the war, the situation looked grim for humanity. Despite their victories, the cost was terrible. 15 human colonies had been attacked. Billions of credits spent on war production. Every family on Earth knew someone who had died. The Valtari Empire was bloodied but not broken. They still controlled hundreds of worlds. Their fleets, though smaller, still outnumbered humanity's ships 10 to 1. Admiral Kang Minho sat in his office, reviewing casualty reports. The numbers blurred together after a while. Each number represented a life, a family, a future that would never happen. His aide knocked and entered without waiting for permission. The young officer's face was pale. "Sir, the War Council has sent new orders. They want us to consider a strategic withdrawal, consolidate our forces around Earth and the core colonies. Let the outer settlements fend for themselves." Minho did not look up from the reports. "Tell the War Council their order is rejected." "But sir, we cannot defend everything. We are spread too thin. The Empire is preparing another major offensive." Minho finally raised his eyes. "That is exactly what I'm counting on. Send a message to all fleet commanders. We are going to attack Valtari Prime." The aide stared at him in shock. "Sir, that is suicide." "The homeworld is defended by 50 battle stations and 3 full fleets. We would never get close." "Exactly what the Valtari will think," Minho said with a cold smile, "which is why they will not see it coming." The plan was insane by any military standard. Valtari Prime was the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. Attacking it with humanity's small fleet would be throwing away their remaining military power. But Minho understood something important. Wars were not won through military power alone. They were won by breaking the enemy's will to fight. He gathered every available ship. 200 vessels, half of humanity's remaining fleet. It was barely enough to threaten a minor Valtari colony, let alone their homeworld. But Minho was not planning a conventional attack. Colonel Bei Taejin commanded the assault force. He was a quiet man who rarely smiled. Before the war, he had been a teacher at the Naval Academy. Now he commanded the most dangerous mission in human history. He understood the plan and accepted it, even though success seemed impossible. The human fleet emerged from FTL at the edge of the Valtari home system. Immediately, they began broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is the human defense fleet. We are giving the civilian population of Valtari Prime 48 hours to evacuate. After that time, we will commence bombardment. This is not a negotiation." The message shocked the entire galaxy. Attacking military targets was one thing, but threatening civilians crossed every line of civilized warfare. Species across the galaxy watched to see what humanity would do. The Valtari Archon Thelmora responded with contempt. "Your empty threats fool no one, humans. You lack the strength to attack our homeworld, and you lack the will to murder billions of innocents. Withdraw now, and we might allow some of your colonies to survive." Humanity's response was to begin moving their ships into bombardment positions. The vessels spread out around the planet, each one carrying thousands of tungsten rods. These simple weapons were based on old Earth military theory. Drop heavy objects from orbit at high speed. When a rod hit at nearly the speed of light, it released as much energy as a nuclear weapon. The humans called them rods from God. The Valtari fleet moved to intercept, confident they could easily destroy the smaller human force. Then the human ships began launching their rods. Not at the planet, but at the Valtari fleet itself. Thousands of tungsten projectiles moving at incredible speed. Impossible to dodge, difficult to shoot down. The Valtari shields held against most impacts, but the sheer number overwhelmed their defenses. Bai Tejin watched from his command ship as the battle unfolded.
"All ships maintain bombardment pattern."
"Do not engage their fleet directly. Just keep firing." The Valtari commanders were confused. This was not standard tactics. The humans were not trying to fight a proper battle. They were just throwing projectiles and retreating when the Valtari ships got close. It was frustrating and difficult to counter. Then intelligence reported something that made the Valtari admirals panic. The humans had seeded the entire system with stealth mines. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, floating in space, invisible to sensors. Every time a Valtari ship moved, it risked hitting a mine. The home system had become a death trap. Archon Thelmora faced a terrible choice. She could order the fleet to hunt down every mine, which would take weeks and leave the planet undefended. Or she could keep the fleet close to protect the planet and accept the losses from the mines. Either way, the humans had achieved something no one thought possible. They had made Valtari Prime vulnerable. But the real masterstroke came 3 days into the siege. The human ships suddenly stopped attacking and began retreating. The Valtari fleet pursued, eager to destroy the enemy. Then Captain Kim Sora's stealth ships, which had been hiding in the system for weeks, attacked the now undefended orbital stations. The battle stations had powerful weapons designed to fight fleets, but they were slow to target small, fast-moving ships. Sora's teams planted explosives on critical systems and escaped before the Valtari could respond. When the charges detonated, 12 of the 50 battle stations went offline. The Valtari fleet rushed back to defend their home world, only to find the human attack fleet waiting in ambush. The humans had never retreated. They had used stealth fields to hide while the Valtari fleet chased sensor ghosts. Now the human ships emerged behind the Valtari formation and opened fire. The battle was vicious and costly. Humanity lost 40 ships, but the Valtari lost twice that number, and more importantly, they lost their confidence. For the first time in 3,000 years, Valtari Prime was under direct threat. Civilians on the planet panicked. The government ordered evacuations. The military scrambled to reinforce defenses. The psychological impact was devastating. If the Empire could not protect its own homeworld, how could it protect its citizens? If humanity could threaten Valtari Prime with a small fleet, what could they do with more ships? News of the attack spread across the galaxy in hours. The vassal species under Valtari control saw their masters vulnerable. Rebellions that had been smoldering burst into open warfare. The Empire suddenly faced enemies on dozens of fronts. Sergeant Nam Yunji was embedded with one of these rebel groups on the world of Krelnor. The local species, the Krelni, had been enslaved by the Valtari for 800 years. They had tried to rebel before, but were always crushed. Now watching humanity fight the Empire to a standstill, they were ready to try again. Yunji and her team provided weapons and training, but more importantly, they provided knowledge. They taught the Krelni about guerrilla warfare, about sabotage, about how to fight an enemy stronger than yourself. These lessons came from human history, resistance movements, insurgencies, revolutions. Tactics developed over thousands of years of human conflict. The Krelni learned quickly. Within weeks, Valtari supply convoys were being ambushed. Factories were sabotaged. Garrison troops faced constant attacks from an enemy they could not find. The Valtari military, designed to fight fleet battles in space, had no idea how to fight an insurgency. Similar rebellions erupted on 17 other worlds. Each one required Valtari forces to respond, stretching their military even thinner. The empire that had been focused on fighting humanity now faced threats throughout its territory. On Valtari Prime, Archon Thelmora called an emergency council. Her advisors argued about strategy, but she could see the truth in their eyes. They were afraid. The empire was cracking, not from military defeats alone, but from the realization that they were not invincible. "How did this happen?" she asked quietly. "We have superior technology, superior numbers, 3,000 years of experience ruling the galaxy. How is a primitive species defeating us?" Her military advisor, General Kothrak, provided the answer she did not want to hear. "Because they fight like nothing we have ever faced. They do not follow our rules. They do not accept our definitions of honorable combat. They use every advantage, every trick, every deception, and they will not stop. Even when we kill their soldiers, destroy their ships, bomb their colonies, they keep coming. They fight as if their survival depends on victory." "It does," Thelmora said softly. "We made sure of that when we destroyed New Busan." Admiral Kang Minho stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Valtari Prime through the viewport. The planet was beautiful from space, covered in silver cities and blue oceans. He thought about all the people down there living their lives, unaware of how close they had come to destruction. His tactical officer approached. "Sir, we have reports from intelligence. The Empire is pulling back forces from their frontier to defend the core worlds. They are abandoning territory." Minho nodded. "Good. That is the beginning of the end. Once an empire starts retreating, it rarely stops." He turned to his crew. "Prepare the fleet for withdrawal. We have made our point. Now we let fear do the rest of our work." The war had lasted 18 months, and humanity was changing. Not just their military or their technology, but something deeper, something that worried the people who still remembered what Earth had been like before the war. General Oh Seung-hyun noticed it in the reports that crossed his desk every day. Orders that once would have required careful consideration now got approved without question. He sat in his office on Earth, looking at the latest request from the field. Major Lee Hee-jin wanted permission to deploy chemical weapons on a Valtari agricultural world. The attack would not kill many soldiers. It would contaminate the soil and water, making the planet useless for farming. Millions of Valtari civilians would face starvation within months. Lieutenant Park Jimin, his aide, stood waiting for the general's decision. The young officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, this violates the Geneva Conventions. We signed those treaties to prevent exactly this kind of warfare." Seung-hyun kept his face neutral. "The Geneva Conventions apply to Earth conflicts between human nations. The Valtari never signed them. They are not bound by our rules, Amir, but we are, sir. We bound ourselves to these principles because we believed they were right, not because others forced us." The general looked at his aide with tired eyes. "Right and wrong are luxuries for species that can afford to lose. Humanity cannot. The Valtari have 40 times our population. They control hundreds of worlds. If we fight a clean war by our old rules, we lose. And when we lose, every human in the galaxy dies." He signed the authorization. "Approved. Tell Major Hae-jin to proceed with the operation." Park Jimin took the order but did not leave. "Sir, what happens if we win? What kind of species will we have become?" "One that survives," Seung-hyun replied. "That is the only thing that matters now." But not everyone agreed. Commander Young Soo-yoon commanded a destroyer on the front lines. She had been fighting since the war began, following every order, watching her friends die in battles across the galaxy. Then came the order to execute Valtari prisoners who refused to provide intelligence. The prisoners were soldiers, not civilians. They had fought in battles where human colonies were destroyed. By military logic, they were enemy combatants who might have valuable information. By human ethics, they were prisoners of war who deserved protection under international law. Soo-hyun refused the order. She told her crew that humanity's values were not negotiable even in wartime. She was immediately arrested for treason and brought back to Earth for trial. Her case became news across the human worlds. Dr. Kwon Hyun-woo, a philosophy professor turned activist, organized protests outside the military tribunal. Thousands of humans gathered, demanding that their leaders remember why they were fighting. "We are trying to save humanity," Kwon told the crowds. "But if we become monsters to survive, then what exactly are we saving? A species that tortures prisoners? That poisons planets? That commits genocide? Is that what we want humanity to be?" The protests spread to other colonies. People who had lost family members to Valtari attacks argued with people who believed humanity needed to maintain its moral principles. Families split apart over the question. Friends became enemies. Human society, which had been united in the face of extinction, began to fracture. Ambassador Park Ji-ho, who had started the war with his declaration in the Galactic Council, found himself questioning everything. He visited Commander Soo-hyun in prison. They sat in a small room, separated by a transparent barrier. "I lost my daughter to this war," Park Ji-ho said quietly. "I wanted revenge. I wanted the Valtari to suffer as we suffered. And now we are winning. But I look at what we have become and wonder if my daughter would be proud or horrified." Soo-hyun leaned forward. "We can still choose who we want to be. The war is not over yet. We can win without losing our souls, can we?" Park Ji-ho asked. "Every commander in the field says we need these harsh tactics to survive. Every military advisor says we must be ruthless, and the numbers support them. Our brutal tactics are working. We are winning." "Winning is not the same as being right," Soo-hyun said firmly. Her trial divided humanity. Some called her a hero for standing up for human values. Others called her a traitor who endangered human survival. In the end, the tribunal found her guilty but gave her a light sentence recognizing the moral complexity of her situation. She was dishonorably discharged but not imprisoned. While humanity debated its soul, the war continued. Admiral Kang Min-ho prepared for what he hoped would be the final offensive. The target was the Valtari Imperial Citadel, an ancient fortress that had stood for 5,000 years. It was the command center for the entire empire. Destroying it would cripple the Valtari ability to coordinate their remaining forces. Min-ho gathered the largest human fleet ever assembled, 300 ships, representing 2/3 of humanity's remaining military power. If this attack failed, Earth would be defenseless. It was the ultimate gamble. Dr. Lee Sun-hee, a scientist who specialized in alien cultures, was embedded with the fleet. Her job was to analyze Valtari communications and provide intelligence. 3 days before the assault was scheduled to begin, she made a discovery that changed everything. She found old files in captured Valtari data archives, communications from 18 months ago, just before the destruction of New Busan. What she read made her blood run cold. She immediately requested a meeting with Admiral Min-ho. "Sir, I need to show you something," Sun-hee said, her hands shaking as she pulled up the files. "These are communications from the Valtari officer who ordered the attack on New Busan, Officer Krelosh. He was young, newly promoted, commanding his first mission." Min-ho looked at the files with growing unease. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" "Orders for a training exercise. The battle group was supposed to conduct drills near human space. But Krelosh misunderstood the coordinates. He thought New Busan was an abandoned test target, not an active colony. When he realized his mistake after the attack, he sent emergency communications to his superiors." She pulled up more files. The Valtari government was preparing to apologize. They were going to pay reparations, punish Krelosh, and make amends. "These communications were sent the day before Ambassador Park made his declaration of war." The room fell silent. Every officer present understood the implications. The war that had killed billions, destroyed hundreds of worlds, and nearly shattered humanity's soul had started because of a mistake. A terrible, catastrophic mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. Admiral Min-ho's face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the edge of the desk until his knuckles turned white. "Does anyone else know about this?" "No, sir. I brought it directly to you." "Who has access to these files?" "Just me and my research team. 4 people total." Min-ho stood and looked out the viewport at the stars. The Imperial Citadel waited somewhere out there, along with hundreds of Valtari ships and millions of soldiers. The final battle that would end the war was days away. He thought about the families waiting on Earth for news, the soldiers who had died believing they were avenging murdered children, the moral compromises humanity had made to survive. He thought about what would happen if this information became public. The human military would lose its sense of righteous purpose. Soldiers would refuse to fight. Families of the dead would demand explanations. The war effort would collapse from within, and the Valtari, sensing weakness, would rally for one final push. He thought about Commander Soo-hyun and her belief that humanity could win without losing its soul. He thought about his own daughter, safe on Earth, who might inherit a galaxy shaped by the choice he was about to make. Finally, he turned back to Dr. Sun-hee. "Delete those files. All copies. Wipe them from every system. Sir, the truth? The truth is that New Busan was destroyed and 200,000 humans died. Whether it was deliberate or accidental does not bring them back. The truth is that we are days away from ending this war and securing humanity's future. The truth is that some burdens must be carried by leaders so that others can live with themselves. His voice was firm but not cruel. Delete the files, Doctor. That is an order. Sun-Hee looked at him with tears in her eyes. She understood what he was doing and why. She also understood the weight he was choosing to carry. Yes, sir. After she left, Minho sat alone in his office. He poured himself a drink and looked at a photo of his family. In 3 days, he would lead humanity's fleet against the Imperial Citadel. They would win or die trying. Either way, he would carry this secret to his grave. Some lies, he thought, were told to protect people from unbearable truths. But that did not make them any less heavy. The assault on the Imperial Citadel began at dawn. 300 human ships emerged from FTL space in a coordinated strike that had taken months to plan. The ancient fortress floated in orbit around a dead moon, its weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. Admiral Kang Minho knew that many of his ships would not return. He had accepted that cost. The battle lasted 14 hours. Human ships used every tactic they had learned during the war. Stealth attacks, cyber warfare, kamikaze runs by automated vessels, wave after wave of tungsten rods fired from maximum range. The Valtari defenders fought desperately, but they were facing an enemy that had evolved through 18 months of brutal warfare. When the Citadel's shields finally collapsed, the fortress was already evacuating. The human fleet held fire as escape pods fled toward nearby Valtari ships. Colonel Bei Taijin, commanding the final assault wave, received orders directly from Minho. Let them go. We have made our point. The fall of the Imperial Citadel broke the Valtari Empire. Without their command center, coordination between fleets became impossible. Regional commanders began making independent decisions. Some chose to fight on. Others sued for peace. A few simply abandoned their positions and fled to neutral space. Archon Thelmora watched the destruction from her command ship. She was an old woman by Valtari standards, having led her people for 200 years. She had seen the empire at its height. Now she watched it crumble. She made a decision that no Valtari leader had ever made before. She contacted the humans and requested peace negotiations. The meeting took place on a neutral station at the edge of known space. Thelmora arrived with a small escort, wearing formal robes of mourning. The human delegation included Ambassador Park Ji-ho, Admiral Kang Min-ho, and President Song Yuna. The 3 humans looked tired. They had aged years in the 18 months of war. Thelmora entered the negotiation chamber alone. She looked at the humans for a long moment before speaking. I am here to discuss terms of surrender. The words shocked everyone listening. Never in 3,000 years had the Valtari Empire surrendered. President Song Yuna, who had been elected during the war specifically to lead humanity through the crisis, gestured to a seat. Please sit. Let us talk. The negotiations took 3 days. The human terms were harsh but not vindictive. The Valtari Empire would dissolve its offensive military capabilities, maintaining only defensive forces for system security. All vassal species would be granted immediate independence. The Empire would pay reparations to humanity for 3 generations. Valtari worlds would be prohibited from possessing weapons of mass destruction for 100 years. Thelmora accepted every term without argument. On the 3rd day, Ambassador Park Ji-ho asked her the question everyone wanted answered. Why? Why surrender now? Your empire still controls hundreds of worlds. You could fight for years. Thelmora looked at him with ancient, tired eyes. Because you have proven something that terrifies me. You have shown that you will sacrifice everything before accepting defeat. You turned your entire civilization into a war machine. You compromised your own values. You sent your children to fight in battles they might not survive. And you did it without hesitation because you believed you had no choice. She paused. A species that desperate is impossible to defeat. You will keep coming, keep adapting, keep fighting until either you win or the galaxy burns. Peace is preferable to extinction. The treaty was signed aboard the human flagship in orbit around Valtari Prime. Representatives from dozens of species attended, watching history being made. When Thelmora placed her seal on the document, the war officially ended. Humanity had won. But the cost was staggering. 30% of human colonies damaged or destroyed. Military casualties exceeded 2 million. Civilian deaths reached 800 million. The human economy would take decades to recover, and the psychological scars would last generations. With the war over, the galaxy faced a new reality. The Valtari Empire that had maintained order for 3 millennia was gone. Dozens of newly independent species immediately began fighting over territory and resources. Ancient grudges turned into open warfare. Trade routes collapsed. Pirates operated freely in areas where Imperial patrols once kept peace. The galaxy was descending into chaos, and the only species with the military power to restore order was humanity. Chancellor Kim Jun-ho took charge of Earth's new Interstellar Relations Department. He was a diplomat, not a soldier, and he understood that humanity faced a choice: become the new empire that ruled through force, or try something different. He chose to try something different. Working with other species, he helped establish the Galactic Assembly, a democratic body where every species had a voice regardless of size or power. It was messy and often inefficient. Debates lasted for weeks. Consensus was difficult to achieve, but it was better than war. Humanity provided military support to the new system, deploying fleets to protect trade routes and stop conflicts before they escalated. But they made it clear they would not rule. They would protect but not control. Some species appreciated this approach. Others saw it as weakness. A few tested humanity's resolve by attacking their neighbors. Representative Shin Aryam addressed the Galactic Assembly during one such crisis. She was young, only 35, but she had lost her entire family when their colony was destroyed during the war. Her speech was broadcast across the galaxy. You ask why humanity spends its resources protecting species that are not our allies, why we risk our soldiers to stop conflicts that do not threaten us directly, why we do not simply take what we want when we have the power to do so. She paused, looking across the chamber at the dozens of alien species represented. It is because we remember what we became during the war. We remember the choices we made, the lines we crossed, the values we compromised. We won that war, but we nearly lost ourselves in the process, she continued, her voice strong. We do not want to rule you. We do not want your resources or your territory. What we want is to ensure that no species ever has to become what we became. We want a galaxy where conflicts are resolved through negotiation, not extinction. We want to prove that the human species can be as good at building peace as we were at waging war. The speech resonated across the galaxy. Some species remained skeptical, but others began to trust that humanity was serious about creating a different kind of order. Slowly, painfully, the new system began to function. 5 years after the war ended, Admiral Kang Minho retired from military service. He was 58 years old and looked 70. The war had aged him in ways that went beyond years. He accepted a teaching position at the Naval Academy, training the next generation of officers. One of his students, a young lieutenant named Lee Do-hyun, asked the question that haunted everyone who had fought in the war. Sir, was it worth it? All the people who died, all the terrible things we did, all the moral compromises we made. Was defeating the Valtari worth what we became? Minho considered the question carefully. He thought about the secret he carried, the truth about New Busan that would die with him. He thought about the orders he had given, the decisions he had made, the weight of command that never got lighter. We did not fight to prove we were better than the Valtari, he said finally. We fought because the alternative was extinction. We crossed lines that should never be crossed. We did things that will haunt us forever. But we survived. And now the real challenge begins, proving that humanity can use our survival to build something better. He looked at the young officer. The war is over, Lieutenant. What we do with the peace we bought determines whether all those sacrifices meant something. Every choice you make, every order you follow or refuse, every value you uphold or compromise, that is your answer to whether it was worth it. Earth built monuments to remember the fallen. In every human city, memorials listed the names of those who died. Millions of names carved into stone, metal, and glass. At the center of each memorial was an inscription written in every human language. They died so humanity could live. We live so their sacrifice has meaning. Children learned about the war in school, not as a tale of heroism and glory, but as a cautionary reminder of what happens when species have no choice but total war. Teachers emphasized the moral struggles, the difficult decisions, the cost of victory. The goal was to ensure future generations understood that winning a war did not make everything done during that war right. Dr. Kwan Hunwoo, who had protested the war's brutality, became a prominent voice in the discussion of human ethics. He traveled to colonies across human space, speaking about the importance of maintaining moral principles even in desperate times. "We cannot change what we did during the war," he told audiences, "but we can choose what we do with the future we bought with such terrible cost." Commander Jung Soo-hyun, who had been court-martialed for refusing orders, was quietly reinstated and given a position training military ethics officers. Her job was to teach soldiers how to balance duty with morality, how to question orders that violated fundamental human values, how to be warriors without becoming monsters. The Valtari adapted to their new reality. Their empire was gone, but their species survived. Some Valtari were bitter about their defeat. Others were relieved that the war had ended before their entire civilization was destroyed. Young Valtari began to question the old,